Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. I'm Chris Muntz and this is episode 115, the Acapella Revolution with Rob Dietz. Acapella guru, Acapella shaman, Rob Dietz joins me this week to tell his story of passion for the pop acapella genre of ensemble vocal music. Rob is well known in this subgenre of choral music for his work on the sing-off and collaborations with groups as wide-ranging as Pentatonix to Flo Rida and Incubus. In this conversation, we explore the common threads of a cappella and air quotes traditional choral ensembles, as we also clumsily move around these terms and these categories as they tend to blur together, as most categories do, as well as we talk about what makes the small pop vocal groups special to Rob and the genre's growing number of practitioners. Finally, we move our conversation into how choral directors like me and many others, probably some of you, who are not well versed in this style, can begin effectively exposing our students to this type of music that they will probably enjoy. And there, as you're going to hear Rob discuss, there are many benefits that they can pull out of from a small ensemble like this. Even your choral ensembles will be able to pull benefits out of small pop a cappella arrangements and performance. So whether you are an a cappella guru yourself, or if you're like me and are new to this style or know nothing about this style, I think both groups are going to get a lot out of this episode. Stick around and listen and give Rob a chance to sell you, like he did me, on the Acapella Revolution. I had such a great time being able to make in-person presentations and live visits to listeners and state chapters, etc., throughout the course of the summer in 2022. I'm starting to get some opportunities to come out and visit state groups again in 2023, but I've still got availability. So if you're interested in having your state convention or your school PD or just your choir choralosophized, then head over to choralosophy.com and find the clinician request button at the top. School is starting, or it's already started, so make sure you get your Sight Reading Factory memberships going. sightreadingfactory.com. Put Choralosophy at checkout. Once you've got your membership and all of your students' memberships in the checkout page, enter Choralosophy. It'll knock 10% off every time you use that code. I want to tell you about my favorite way to use mymusicfolders.com. This is something I've been doing since way before they were a sponsor on the Choralosophy podcast. My favorite way to use My Music Folders is to custom make folders as a gift for my all-staters. Now, in your environment, that could be your all-district singer, but I find that that's an extremely meaningful gift. So I have engraved, it's a service they provide there at mymusicfolders.com, engraved their name, their voice part, and their school, and then they get that as a gift when they make one of these prestigious honor choirs, and they get to then use it for the rest of the school year and take it with them forever and keep it as a keepsake from their achievement. It's practical, it's sentimental, it's an awesome gift. And then, of course, now that I have affiliation with them on the podcast, I can enter Choralosophy at checkout and get a 5% discount. You can go to mymusicfolders.com for any of your choir paraphernalia needs and enter Choralosophy at checkout as well and get a discount. So July saw another month of unprecedented growth on the Patreon. Patreon.com/Choralosophy is a place where for as little as $3 a month, you can support the show. You can also get access to my Google folder of goodies. You can get access to full-length episodes. You can get access to behind-the-scenes episodes and so much more. So head on over there and subscribe today. The producer-level sponsors at Patreon are Brannigan Lawrence, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, John Warner, Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Angie Schilling, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Jared Hendricks, Jeff Wall, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Nathan Hines, Ryan Main, and Stephen Kathy Kakachik. All right, everybody, I am here with Rob Dietz. And
hello.
Yes, I'm super excited, and I've been waiting for this moment all day because now I get to say that you're here to give us some deets on a cappella music.
Hey, there it is.
I'm sure you've never heard that joke before, ever in your life.
Never once. You're the first person.
Yeah, I figured. I'm magical with the name puns. So I'm really excited to talk to you because I'm going to just jump right in here and start this conversation by sharing something with you that my audience probably is not surprised by, which is that a cappella contemporary music is not in my wheelhouse. I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn from you. I'm kind of afraid of it, to be honest, because I don't have any background in it, any education in it. So I do want to learn about why you love it and why you're into it. But then also maybe we could have some message towards the end to other directors like me who maybe we're afraid of it, but we want to give it a shot. So
Yeah.
that there's a lot of things I'd like to talk with you about, Rob. So first, why don't you tell us who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing?
Awesome. Sure. Well, first of all, let me just say thank you for having me. And it's actually really exciting to hear you say that because you're exactly my target audience. I usually feel like I love, because I came from a very similar background, actually. I grew up singing in choir and I grew up, with a very kind of traditional choral background. And in tandem with that, I sort of got this love for pop music, and I was looking for ways to sort of combine the choral music and the pop music, and acapella just sort of fell in my lap. And I was like, oh, this is like the perfect combination of these two things that I really love. And so, when I hear folks like you that come from that background and are interested in this, I get really excited because I'm like, oh yeah, that was me. Like that was totally, where I came from. So I'm all about sort of demystifying the process and demystifying the style, and sort of helping people see that they already have a lot of the tools that they need to do this really well. So I grew up, upstate New York, Ithaca, New York, middle of nowhere. I was a big choral singer growing up in high school, sang in community choirs and in my high school chorus and did all the musicals and stuff like that. And I actually wound up staying in Ithaca for college. I went to Ithaca College, where I was a bachelor in music with an outside field in business. So it was like a little less than a dual major, but a little bit more than a minor. I just tell people I dual majored because it sounds cooler. And that was my major, but I basically majored in acapella because I already knew that I just coming in, I knew that I loved acapella. And I didn't quite at that point know that it was going to be my career, but I knew that was sort of what I was really passionate about doing at that point. And I directed the group there called A Cappella for many years, and sang in the choirs there, and did a lot of training in conducting, which was something that really interested me also. I really still wasn't sure when I was going through school where I was going to wind up, but I knew that I loved a cappella and I knew that I loved music, and I wanted to find some way to sort of combine those things. And at the time, I think I actually thought I was going to go more into the business of music. That was sort of what the business, the outside field thing was. I was looking for like, oh, maybe I'll be an agent or a manager, or I'll, do something with a venue. I had sort of those thoughts in my head. And I graduated from school and wound up, so the long story short, wound up out in Los Angeles, where I wound up working for a show called The Sing Off. And that was sort of where I got the exposure to like all the different sides of the music industry at once, kind of through the TV work. And through that experience, it became very clear to me, oh, no, I'm a creative person. Like I'm an arranger, I'm a composer, I'm a performer. I really want to focus on this side of things. So at that point, post the show, there was actually an a cappella industry that had come up to the point where you actually could make a career out of a cappella. Before that, it didn't really exist. It wasn't really something that you could do full time. But I was really lucky to sort of ride the wave of a cappella popularity in the 2010 to 2015 zone. And I wound up working for the show for a few seasons. And then after it was done, I wound up staying out in LA. And I just do freelance arranging, composing, teaching, and performing now. And one of my big passions the last few years has been looking for ways not only to help people do the contemporary a cappella thing, but also to bring the contemporary a cappella thing into the choral setting in ways that are really accessible, I hope, and sort of allow people to access that sound and start to work with that sound without having to do full-on contemporary a cappella arrangements, doing things that still kind of feel idiomatic for choir. So I've been writing a lot of pieces that kind of use the contemporary a cappella techniques in with that, traditional choral thing that I really like. And that's been something that I've been really excited about too. So that's kind of where I wound up, and that's what I'm doing now, and working on that sound. And I just wound up, was appointed to a position with ACDA. I'm the contemporary commercial chair for the next couple of years, specializing in a cappella. So that's really exciting also.
Great.
Going to get to represent a cappella with ACDA, which is super exciting because I think there's a lot of partnership to be had there. And things are rolling right along, and it's exciting to be bringing these things together.
That's awesome. So when because I'm curious, so I have to ask, when you did work on the sing-off, what was you say you worked, but tell us, what does that mean? Like, what did you do when you were working for a TV show that's about a cappella music? in groups?
Totally. Yeah. So I was on, basically there was a music team the number of people on the team vary, usually about 6 of us. And Deke Sharon, who's a name you might have heard,
Yep.
he has a lot of published arrangements. A lot of people are probably familiar with his work. He was the head of the team. So he was the producer that was in charge of the team. And I actually started as an assistant, but then I worked my way up to arranger and group coach. And basically what that was is, so we had each season was a little bit different, the number of groups on the show, but we had, I think season 3 was like 16, and then season 4 was 8 or something like that. We'd have these groups come in, and sometimes they would arrange for themselves, but sometimes they also weren't able to arrange for themselves, or even if they could arrange for themselves, the TV stuff happens so quickly. You have the performance, and then we find out who makes it to the next show, who was eliminated, and then boom, the next day we got to start the next arrangement. So part of my job was arranging for those groups, helping groups sort of finish up their arrangements if they had people in the group that were arrangers. I helped kind of supplement that work. And then going into rehearsal and working with groups and just making sure that everything was up to par for the TV performance. And also sort of liaising through Deke with the other producers. And there was just a lot of people that needed different things, that we're talking about how the camera's going to capture it, and how it's going to compare to the other groups and what the branding is going to be, and all these sort of things that were balanced out. So the music team was really in charge of kind of taking all of that information and making it into performances that could be televised.
That's awesome. That's such a neat experience, and definitely it seems like it would be kind of taking some of your skills, but then, like you said before, plugging them into this commercial world too.
Yeah.
Which for many of us in choral music, we're just. I don't know if this is already controversial to say this early in a podcast episode, but almost many of us seem like anti-commercial. In other words, like we're artists. We don't care about this kind of thing. We're academics. But and I think this is one of the things I want to dive into with you is that with pop music and pop acapella, we are taking from an art form essentially that is commercial. If the record doesn't sell, the song doesn't become popular, vice versa. That kind of thing. And so what are some things that maybe in that pop commercial world that you need to care about that maybe is different than the classical traditional choral classroom?
It's an interesting question. I think certainly I can speak to the TV angle. The audience is very different. And one of the big things with the sing-off in particular was, the amount of time that you have to present things, right? So, choral piece can easily be, 4, 5, 6, 7, long minutes, and you have all this time to kind of explore something and develop something. And in pop music, and actually particularly, we see this sort of with the TikTok trends and things now, streaming trends where, the trend is towards getting something faster because in the TikTok and streaming world, how much money you get from it is calculated by how much percentage of it people listen to. Mm-hmm. So there's a motivation also in that realm to make things shorter so people don't have to listen to as much for you to get the credit for the listen.
Right.
That's something that's on the commercial side of things that people are thinking about that is not so much on the radar of someone who's doing a live choral performance where you can take that more time to sort of flesh things out, or you can have those things. That being said, there are techniques that I've heard about in the pop world and that I've used in the pop world to sort of get around that a little bit and have a little bit more of development in a shorter span of time. And that's actually something that I think is really cool. People that kind of learn from the classical direction and learn from more of the concert setting and take that information into the pop realm, kind of use a little bit more of those techniques of, themes and, motifs and things like that. And weaving that into even shorter pop compositions in really cool ways. There's some people that are doing stuff like that. So that's one of the big differences. And I think you're talking about the idea of sort of the art versus commerce thing, right? I think that a lot of the mindset of, certainly the choral world that I came from, I don't want to speak for everybody because everybody kind of has different things and there's different corners of the community for sure. But I think that the focus really is on, for a lot of people on the art of the thing and not, worrying necessarily. I think worrying about getting people to come see it because we need to fill audiences, but not really worrying so much about the quote unquote broad appeal and the mass shooting at the masses that we're kind of doing our thing. So
in a choral work you can get away with sometimes 2.5 minutes of humming on in an F major chord
Right.
and then wait for something interesting to happen 3 minutes into the piece. And in any kind of pop or streaming or anything, like people just click to the next thing.
Yeah,
So
you
it's
gotta get there faster.
you got to get there, grab their attention, and keep it. So that makes sense because those are. It's not, and I didn't mean for that to come across like one is better than the other thing. I just think it's
Oh no,
important
sure.
to point out that it's like those are different priorities. Like the
Yeah,
priorities are different.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting. So why don't you dig into a little bit with us? Maybe go a little bit deeper into the moment where you fell in love with pop a cappella. Do you have a story to like? I know I have that with
Mm.
choral music, but was there a transformational moment where you were like, "This is the kind of music that I can dig into. This is my thing."
Yeah. I remember it was actually my middle school choir teacher so this is a little bit of a backstory. So my middle school choir teacher also went to Ithaca and was in the same a cappella group that I was in many years before me. And in that group with him were a few other guys that graduated and started a professional a cappella group called the Sons of Pitches. And they were just coming up in my hometown right around the time I was in middle school. And since had been in an a cappella group with my teacher, they were friends with him. And he was one of the first people that got their album. So he used to play their album in the classroom during lunch. And I remember one day I walked in and I heard it and I was like, what is this? I love this thing. This is so cool. How do I do this? And he was like, these are my friends, Sons of Pitches, et cetera, et cetera. So I was a big fan of that group. And then kind of through that, that the timing of it was really interesting because, this was 2002, 2003, kind of early 2000s. It was right when the internet was sort of connecting everybody in different communities in a way that there hadn't really been the opportunity to connect before. So through, the RARB message board was one of them, the Recorded Acapella Review Board.
Hmm.
I started connecting with other a cappella fans from all over the world, and I started becoming aware of this larger a cappella community. And I really started to get excited about all of the stuff that was going on in that bigger community. And there were certain things that I think everybody, rockapella sort of everybody knows about from Carmen
Yeah,
Sandiego.
yeah.
And, there were sort of touchstones for people like that. But then, finding out about all these other groups that were operating like just below the surface. And then just, ordering all these CDs. This was back when, pre-streaming, pre-iTunes, like, ordering all these albums to listen to and really diving into, all the things that were out there. That was really kind of my intro to it. And I think I came to it at a really cool time in my life too, because I think that, whatever we discover, that age, 12, 13, 14, whatever music you kind of get into at that point, I think like has a certain magic to it. So I was sort of coming to this with the like fresh teenage brain of like, give me more, I want to learn everything about this and really fully experience it. So, that was sort of my entrance to the a cappella world. And, I was really fortunate to connect with a lot of people through those communities who helped me find even more of it and kind of fostered my love for it even more.
Yeah, so it was the music, but it was also the people that surrounded the music that kind of
Yeah.
pulled you into a community, it sounds like.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
totally.
That's great.
Totally.
So, of course, you've worked with a ton of a cappella ensembles by now, and you've worked with some famous ones. But what is it? And then maybe let's keep this in the spirit of how it's not better or worse than, like we were talking about before, but how is it different working with an a cappella ensemble and coaching them slash helping them find their groove versus working with a traditional choral ensemble in any capacity? What is
Yeah.
it that grabs you about that environment that you love so much?
One of the big things I would say is, because a cappella groups tend to be smaller, there's a lot more ownership that kind of goes into individual parts.
Hmm.
That's something I think is so cool about the creativity of the music, because that was the other thing, you're talking about the people, but I should also say, it was the creativity of the arranging and all the things that voices can do in a pop context and in a choral context too, which is actually something that I try to explore in my writing. But, the fact that a voice can sound like any instrument, but also can sound like itself, and that every individual person has their own thing in their throat that makes that thing, and it's like no two voices are exactly the same. There's just sort of this endless creativity that as an arranger always really spoke to me. But then, yeah, so going in and working with groups, it's first of all, there's the how dynamic the music is, right? Pop music is just so kinetic, and it's just, it's so interesting to see the ways that people interpret music that they're listening to right now into vocal compositions. But then also, no two groups are exactly the same, because you've got maybe 12 singers. A lot of times it's one on a part, and everybody's really bringing their own character to the sound. And when you come in to work with a choir, it's more about shaping kind of the bigger picture, because you might have 15, 20 people on the same part, and it's about kind of crafting those voices to sound good together. And in a smaller group, it's about sounding good together also, but in a way that's less about subjugating is the word that's coming to mind. Less about, fitting in, and more about matching what your personality is to the other personalities that are happening, right? So when I direct groups, for example, like I tell, especially like young singers, I always say like, hey, please bring in your interpretation, right? In a choir, everybody has a different ah vowel. That's not going to blend, right? But in a smaller group, shading different kind of tones of that ah vowel to kind of like pop some parts out, or just maybe create a little bit of a different kind of dynamic in the blend can be really, really exciting. And you can only do that, I think, with a smaller group like that. It's much harder when you have that larger group. And also, articulations and things like that. A big group can't go, whoa, like you can't match a run necessarily like that. But a small group, you could have a background part that does something like that, because you've only got a few people on it, or maybe even one person on it. So kind of bring that out. So you get the individual character of people's voices and performance personalities and stuff like that. And I've always been really fascinated about that. And I've always thought that was a really cool thing in a cappella.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Where there might be certain types of, I guess, goals, even ensemble goals, that in a traditional choral larger ensemble, the actual goal would be to get those things to not happen.
Right.
Because it's because, of course, with more voices, there's just the sheer physics of it. There are too many overtones bouncing around in the room for shenanigans to go on with the alto part to kind of bring their own interpretation. That would cause
it sounds sloppy.
Yeah, right. And because what if we don't all agree on what that interpretation is, and then the conductor doesn't agree, right? So there's a lot of obviously common skills. And I want you to talk a little bit about that too. I think of like what does it take to be good at both? But there's a lot of common skills, but there's also definitely some cross purposes going on where, and I'm interested in this as someone who doesn't really use this style of music very much in my classroom. Do you have to talk to students sometimes, especially young singers? Like, hey, we're in a cappella ensemble mode right now, or hey, we're in a different mode. Like, do their brains have to switch at all? If your school or church are in the market for staging products like risers, shelves, podiums, movable platforms, all of the things that you need to set your choir up for success, I would like to strongly urge you to check out StageRight. StageRight's products are sturdy, they're durable, they're easy to use. I have personal experience with the acoustical shelves and some of the platforms that they have at StageRight, and I can tell you, compared to some of the more expensive competitors, they are a really great option to fit inside of a tight school budget, but also to give you the durability and usability that you need. So check out StageRight at stageright.com.
Yeah, and actually that's something. So I run a summer camp called Acapella Academy, which is I'm wearing the shirt for. And one of the things that we do at the camp is we do have an all-camp choir that gets together every day. And one of the very first things I say to the choir at the beginning of the week is, "Hey, y'all, like, be aware that in this room, the way that you're going to sing is going to be different than the way you're going to sing in your smaller groups. And it's going to be partially a function of blend. It's going to be partially a function of production. It's going to be partially a function of just like awareness of how your part fits into everything else that's going on. Yeah. There are things it has in common. I think that, the foundational principles of, good vocal production with breath and placement and, good foundational things about blend, just vowel shaping and, awareness of your articulators and all those things, all that stuff is in common, but it's how you use them and how you apply them that's different. Mm-hmm. So, getting people into that mindset a little bit And a lot of it is, as a director and as a coach, sometimes when I come and to work with groups that don't have that experience, it's kind of doing things to trick people into leaning a little bit more in whatever direction I need them to go in. It's usually, I think, more effective than saying like, hey, sing like a pop singer now. Sometimes that works, depends on their frame of reference, but a lot of the time it's about saying like, okay, sing this, give me the bright sound. Okay, give it to me like that. Now give me it with a nice tall vowel. Okay, now it exists, you know what I mean? Like shaping that sound and the tone that you want through just different kind of sensational things and different awareness things. I found to be really effective. So, it's a combination of talking and showing and tricking.
Yeah.
Like any good choir director, you have to trick people a little bit to what you want to do.
Yeah. Now I'm going to reveal my ignorance even more here. Do typically, if you're working with a small group of a cappella style singers or an ensemble, even a school or not a school, is it typically into a microphone or no?
Yes.
It is.
These days, these days it is, yes. For a long time, the technology was not there, but in the last 10, 15 years, as acapella has become more expanded and people are more aware of it, the standard is definitely, everybody has their own vocal microphone.
Got it. So similar to like a vocal jazz ensemble.
Exactly.
Oftentimes would be. Okay. So, a couple of questions then related to school groups, because there are, of course, lots of high schools and colleges around the country that do have a cappella groups, right? So small ensembles like you're talking about. What are some really good examples of how that functions in a school program that you've seen? So if you would like, talking to somebody who's interested in having an ensemble or more at their school, what are some of the benefits you've seen in your life just kind of going around to schools and how that affects their overall choral programs and music programs to have that type of a group?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think almost anybody will tell you it's huge for recruitment. I mean, so the thing that we always talk about is that, acapella is the quote unquote gateway drug, right? It's the, you can go out and say, hey, come sing this music that you're familiar with, come sing the songs that you're listening to on the radio. And that kind of brings in people that might not have necessarily been into the program otherwise. And then you can kind of bring them in and be like, hey, isn't it fun singing with other people? Do you want to come try it in this choir also? And you can kind of like ease them into it in that direction. So a lot of groups, I think, have had success with that. And then also, the other thing I like to talk about is that it's not just about, getting people in who, might not have tried it otherwise. I think it's also about getting people in who might not have seen themselves, might not have self-identified as a choral singer, because we kind of see, you see choirs and you see, kind of what that's all about. And, there are singers who might look at that and, maybe they sing in a band or maybe they sing in a different, a barbershop group or a gospel choir or something, that's a different kind of aesthetic from a traditional school choir sort of thing. And they might not see themselves in that. And they might see themselves in a contemporary a cappella group in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise. So I think that that's really important too, of just giving people an opportunity, kind of meeting people where they are, and giving people opportunity to sing, whatever really speaks to them and whatever really gets them excited. Because once you get people singing, they don't want to stop and they'll do the other thing too. And they'll try, they'll be more open to trying stuff. So I've observed that, being a huge part of programs. And then the other component, there's a ton of things I think are so important, but the other thing is pop singing, to do it well, and people that direct groups really well, it's high impact. It's high impact on your voice. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of good technique to do it well. And the technique, the awareness that you develop about your voice from learning the technique of doing that well really serves you well in all singing contexts, not just in the pop stuff, but, being able to use, like I was saying before, kind of access different tones of your voice that are required in pop music. I'll give you an awareness of how to, use your instrument and use your articulators in ways that you probably wouldn't be doing otherwise. And you can apply that to any style of singing. So you can take that, the awareness of, okay, what does it feel like to sing in this place? That's sort of, I did like a mid-Atlantic, old time radio kind of situation there. Like, what does it feel like to access that place? And then you can say, okay, well, if I know how to get here, then I know how to go the other way, and I can go more here. You know what I mean? you can explore that range of tone.
Yeah.
And that's applicable to anything. If you want to go back to, traditional choral setting and say, okay, I need a little bit more of that darker placement. Singers who know what the bright placement feels like can go, okay, it's the other direction from, and it just really brings that added awareness. So I always think that's really cool. And I find that choirs that work with the pop aesthetic and have pop a cappella groups are really versatile in that way and can make some really exciting sounds.
Yeah. Yeah, I want you to help me square a circle then with that I just, because I haven't tried it, I can't visualize it, which is that it's I can see in theory how it would be a good recruiting tool. But at the same time, I also know that the ensemble class or the ensembles are supposed to be small. So if I'm recruiting, what if like 30 kids sign up for an a cappella group? What do I do? Do I have to make multiple? Or can you get away with a 30-person a cappella group? Like, how does that work in practical settings that you've seen?
Totally. So couple different ways. I think one of the things that's really successful is to have like a JV and a varsity group, right? So you can have like a larger beginner group where people can come in and maybe it's either less auditioned or it's non-auditioned or anything like that, where, that group can be a little bit larger and you can use that to do more beginner things, to teach people how to do the more advanced things. And then they get to audition from that into the more advanced group. You can have a larger group. It's definitely possible. If you have a larger group, I think that the types of arrangements you're going to do are going to be a little bit different. I was actually just talking on Twitter the other day about, the things to look for in a contemporary a cappella arrangement that are going to make it work for a larger choir or a larger group of singers. And those are things like, not having tessituras that sit super high so that, groups can blend a little bit more on things that are more in the comfortable chest range, not having super complicated bass parts, so that people can match things up and not worry about a lot of like, doom, 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 group of basses isn't going to be able to get that all together. Stuff like that. But I think that's one thing, to have the separate groups, or you can have you can make experiences for people that either in your regular choir or in a larger a cappella group that utilize that kind of sound, but with arrangements that are going to be more appropriate for a larger ensemble. So. And then, then there's also the thing to be said for, making it a little bit of an elite experience, because then it gives your kids something to work for too, right? If you have that group of 12 or whatever, and everybody wants to be in that group, they're going to work real hard to be in it. So I've seen that work as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder too, because the reason I asked that question is because I'm putting this hypothetical in my brain of if I were to try something like this in our program, I know that what my administrators would probably tell me is that, okay, we can add a class for this, and it'll probably be a class, like one class period, and it's a big school, so it's maybe too many people for one group. So I wonder if you've ever seen this. Is just curious. I'm just curious, and it's okay to just tell me that this is a stupid question. But like, have you ever seen a class period at a school where there are more than one little subgroup within each class?
I don't know if I've seen it in that way, but I've seen, I know you interviewed Dr. JD Frizzell on the show a little while ago. So he's got a group. He has one of the best groups, I think, actually in the country, called One Voice. And they're a class, and he works with them every day, I think, almost every day. I think every day. And so, he's that group is a real model of sort of having that subgroup as a class at school. I don't know. Certainly, I think what you're suggesting could work at a school if you had, multiple smaller ensembles that met during that same period. And maybe it was partially student directed and a director bounced around, or you had multiple directors that were working. I could definitely see that model working also. I think anything it takes to get a group into a school, I'm very pro. I think it's so valuable. So and any way that it works for admin.
Yeah, we're fortunate because we have a lot of room. We just have a lot of space. We just don't have a lot of hours in the day to add stuff. That's the that's the challenge. Okay, so I actually that's a perfect segue, because one of the things that I also wanted to get your advice on, and this is going to be true of a lot of people in my audience listening, because the majority of us run more traditional programs. At least the bulk of our job is serving large classes, and of course there's also an economy of scale there too that keeps us all in jobs, which is that our jobs are oftentimes justified by the fact that I can get 100 kids in one class.
Yeah.
And get paid the same as the math teacher who only teaches 25. And so if we're trying to think of ways to incorporate, let's say my administrator says, no, we cannot have a class to add for a cappella, and you do run more of a traditional choral program with these big choirs. What are some ways to get kids exposed to and access to the genre of just pop a cappella? And you mentioned already that you've got lists of things to look for if the group is bigger, but are there even arrangements out there that are pop a cappella arrangements but designed specifically for bigger choirs? Like, just talk to us about that landscape.
Yeah, totally. One thing I would say as a corollary to that, there is also the student directed after school route, which, I think, you always, that's a common thing that people do. I think you always have to be a little bit careful with that and make sure that the leadership you have in place is, not going to blow people's voices out and do all kinds of crazy stuff. But I think with the right guidance, that can be really useful, and can be really empowering for students as well. Can teach a lot of great skills and, can really set people up for success. But, yeah, if you want to bring it into sort of the regular choir experience, so like I was saying, there's things you can look for in a cappella arrangements that are going to work a little bit better for that setting. I mentioned the bass thing, I mentioned the range thing. Another thing is to talk about vocal percussion, right? So that's a thing that, it's foreign to a lot of directors because you're not going to see that in traditional choir. You're not going to see that in vocal jazz necessarily. And that's the like, that kind of thing, right? For people who aren't familiar. So, you're going to want to look for you might have somebody in your choir who can do that. Typically they're going to need to be amplified in order for that sound to sound right. In a choral setting. So if you either don't have that person or can't amplify them in the right way, looking for pieces where you can swap in body percussion, snapping, clapping, chest tapping, thigh tapping, all that kind of stuff, stomps. I've written a lot of pieces that use that in place of vocal percussion. I've swapped that out for a lot of vocal percussion things in charts where it doesn't always work. So that's something else to keep in mind. I have a book that I released from Hal Leonard a few months ago called Acapella 101, A Beginner's Guide to Contemporary Acapella Singing. And in the first chapter, the end of that first chapter, there's a list of choral pieces. The word traditional, I always kind of balk at, but what I mean by traditional is, the sort of idiom that we're familiar with of, the 80, 60, 70, 80 plus person, traditional quote unquote choir.
Stand still and sing
exactly
quarter notes and half notes. Yeah,
exactly. Tall, bel canto, match the vowels, that whole thing.
Yep.
So I have a list of pieces that I think work well in that setting, and work well for groups like that. So I would point people towards that. And then there's also another text in that book that I referenced that is from GIA Publications. That's a guide to it's teaching performance through contemporary a cappella repertoire. Somebody asked me this the other day too. I cannot remember the exact name of the book, but if you look in my book, it's in that book. And then if you search GIA, for contemporary a cappella, I'm sure you'll find it as well. But there's a book that has suggestions of different a cappella charts and has performance guides for each of them. So some of those work better for larger groups, and then you can see in the book the suggestions from the authors of the ways to make that work well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. And of course, I'm going to make sure that I coordinate with you as I'm putting this episode together this week to make sure that links to stuff are in the show notes. And I've got most of those already because I want people to have access to this. And I'm the way I think of it too. And again, I feel like I did warn everyone at the beginning of this conversation that I do not know what I'm talking about with this topic. So I feel like all of my questions are stupid.
Not a single one has been stupid. These are all great questions.
Okay. So, in the choral publishing world, so if I open up, one of those books that they annoyingly send us every year, even though we didn't ask for it, from every publishing company, and it's got like all the, the new things that come out, and they're written for choirs, and it's advertised for choirs, but sometimes you will see pop song arrangements, and oftentimes they're a cappella. Is that necessarily mean that they are, quote unquote, a cappella arrangements, or are we talking about a genre lead here? Do you know what I mean? I feel like
I do. Yeah. It depends on the publisher. I believe is it Hal Leonard that has the pop acapella? Someone has a specifically like pop, like a modern pop acapella series that they put out. I think it's Hal Leonard. I know that Alfred is also has some stuff that's published. I have a piece that's published with Alfred as well. But you're going to want to look for like the pop acapella thing. I think that's that's the label that people
That's the
usually
moniker.
use.
Yeah.
That's the moniker. Yeah. The other thing
Okay.
you can do is, so now Hal Leonard through mostly Sheet Music Plus as the distributor has this thing called the Arrange Me program. Have you heard about this?
No.
Okay, so the Arrange Me program is a new program that Hal Leonard has been piloting for a little while now. It used to be called something else, but they call it the Arrange Me program now, where it's basically like they bought out a blanket license for all these different copyrighted pop tunes, and it allows you to arrange and upload your arrangement of any of these tunes that they already have the license for. It's millions and millions of songs, and it's a lot of stuff that's really current, and they keep it really up to date. So a lot of contemporary a cappella arrangers are using that service now, myself included, and that really allows us to get around what was the issue with publishing for so long, which was that people would, a song would be on the radio and then you wouldn't be able to get the contemporary a cappella arrangement of it for 6, 7, 8 months, whatever it was down the line, because it had to go through all the hoops of clearing it with the people on the rights and then getting the arrangement written and, doing all the publishing stuff. And now people, because of the Arrange Me program, can just do it at home, upload it. You can go on Sheet Music Plus and search for whatever you want, and you can download the copies and print it. So that's opened up a whole new avenue of this type of arrangement being available. And it's really done some pretty great things for the community and just the repertoire that's out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So if in the back to the small ensemble world, so if you got that smaller group, and let's say you're interested in helping them find something, and I'm going to throw out the scenario that's probably the most likely in many of our worlds, which is that a lot of this stuff might end up being student led, like you mentioned before, if we don't have the
Sure.
program that has a class, built into it. Um, are there, like in some kind of instrumental music ensembles, you can find difficulty level listings? Like, is that typical in pop? Can you go find like easy, or are there level 1, level 2, level 3? How does that work in
Yep.
pop music world?
So for the Arrange Me thing, actually, you can, when you upload your arrangement, it has you put in, beginner, intermediate, advanced. And so I think that shuffles out to level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you'll see when you find these arrangements on there that it'll say level 1, level 2, level 3, 4, 5. I find that most, because I actually just did an article for Sheet Music Plus where I curated a list of some beginner arrangements for them. Most arrangers will list their stuff at level 3 or so. There are some level 2. There are very few level 1. If you take a look at the level 3s, I think a lot of people tend to, just because we kind of think that a cappella is hard anyway, because there's no accompaniment, right? I think people kind of tend to lean up a little bit with the way they self-describe the difficulty. So, I think if you're beginner, you want to look for like level 2, level 1 on there. And then most published pieces, anything that's published through a major, usually going to be pretty accessible. Few exceptions. I think, with like the pop acapella series and stuff, there's stuff that's a little more complicated, but for the most part, because they want to be, wide audience as possible. A lot of the stuff that's published is usually pretty accessible for most, beginner to advanced beginner ensembles.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff out there for
That's
for
great.
that.
That's awesome. So, I want to kind of go into one final little area before we wrap this
Yeah.
up, which is your own work as an arranger. So we've talked a lot about already the kind of tips for ways to think about getting it into our ensembles. But then you wearing your arranger hat,
Mm.
would you say that a majority of the things that you do are things that you write onto paper and then potentially sell down the road to choirs that might want to do it, or is this like a kind of you're for hire kind of a thing where, hey, my group needs like a custom arrangement?
Yep.
Is it
It's
more of that
that.
second thing?
Yep. It's more of that
Interesting.
one. Yep.
And so
Yep.
then once
Very.
that group gets that arrangement from you, is that just theirs now forever?
So what I do, and everybody can sort of do this differently, I have like about a 3-month exclusivity period that I just offer. And sometimes I'll talk to people because if they want to compete with it or they want to do something where it's a little bit more long-term, we can sort of discuss that. But I usually give about a 3-month exclusivity thing where I say, hey, it's going to be, because that's, roughly a concert cycle, right? Just let you perform this. And then after that, I'll often make it available on Sheet Music Plus through Arrange Me. And then, people can buy that as a stock chart of mine. So that's usually how it works. Because a lot of these groups, what's really exciting about this is, they have different groups every year. And like I was saying at the beginning, it's so based on the specific singers that you have, right? And what they're passionate about and what their ranges are and what their skill set is. So custom arrangements are actually a huge part of really what set a lot of groups apart for these smaller ensembles. And a lot of them do commission a lot of stuff like that. So that's most of what I do is commission work. But then I also make those charts available for people down the line.
Okay. So if somebody wants a Rob Dietz custom arrangement, does Rob Dietz then have to, because all these voices are so unique and individual, do you have to in some way get to know the voices as you're crafting it, or how does that work then?
It's interesting. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. Some groups really want me to like get into the nitty gritty of like, I want to do, every individual voice. So, Dr. JD Frizzell, I was talking about, one voice who I arranged for a lot. I think I've done like almost 70 arrangements for them at this point. I've done a lot of arrangements for them. Over the years, we've transitioned from me writing for kind of voice parts to actually writing for specific singers. And what he'll do is he'll provide me with a Google document at the beginning of the year of all of his singers, their ranges, clips of them singing scales, clips of them singing solos. And the first thing that I do, because I usually do 7 or 8 arrangements a year for him, I'll spend some time just familiarizing myself with those voices. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing is, just through my experience and just having done this a long time, I kind of know conservatively what works for different groups. So a lot of the time people will just say, hey, we want you to write for our group. Maybe they'll give me, I always ask for information about the group, whatever they want to give me. Sometimes they do. If they don't, I just kind of know, I know where the center of the target is, like I kind of know like what's going to be pushing it, what's going to be pretty comfortable. And if in the absence of other information, I'll just kind of shoot for what I'm pretty sure is going to be comfortable for most groups.
That's very cool. Well, this has just been really informative, and I cannot thank you enough for filling in my gapful brain on this topic.
Oh, my pleasure.
This is awesome, and because I'm really interested in trying to figure out ways that we can incorporate stuff like this into our world that wasn't built around this. And I think a lot of people will find that find themselves in a similar place. So on the way out, if you wouldn't just mind giving us kind of the rundown of anything cool you've got coming up, but then also give everyone the reminders so that they don't have to go, find my show notes if they don't always. And how do we find your stuff, and how do we find some of these key resources?
Totally. Let me start with the resources. So like I said, I have the book Acapella 101. It's available from Hal Leonard. If you're new to starting a group, if you want to start a group, if you are just a little bit down the road, but you want to, get kind of fill in the gaps in your knowledge, great resource to start with. It covers all kinds of things. Like I said, starting a group, pop vocal technique, arranging, bass singing, vocal percussion, choreography, video, all kinds of cool stuff. So there's some really great stuff in that book. Highly recommend checking that out. I also did want to mention my camp again, Acapella Academy. We are a camp for students ages 12 to 18. We audition from all over the world. It happens at the end of June through July in Los Angeles, where we bring kids together and train them to do this kind of music. We also, as of last year, was our first year in person doing this. We have a program called Grad School, which is designed for music educators that want to come. Have them shadow our program, and we have some special programming for them to teach them how to do this. So that's another great resource. Beyond that, I always tell people, the Contemporary Acapella Society of America is a great place to go. The Acapella Now Facebook group is a great place to go, which is the CASA Facebook hub. Those are all really great places to seek stuff out. My personal website is Rob Dietz Music, Dietz. It's diet with a Z, robdietzmusic.com. All of my stuff is up there, and you can find me there. I'm always happy to answer questions from anybody. I love helping people do this. So feel free to reach out to me. And any other great resources. Yeah, and then Deke Sharon is another great resource. He has a ton of books that have been published on all different aspects of acapella. So you can search Deke Sharon if you're not familiar with his work already, and you'll find a lot of great stuff there. I'm sure I could go on, but that's a good snapshot. That's plenty to get you started if you're looking to fill in those gaps. And then for me, on the choral front, I'm excited to continue, kind of bringing this sound into the choral world through my position with ACDA. Please reach out to me if you're an ACDA member. I'm the national representative for contemporary commercial. Kelsey Burkett is the other person who's contemporary commercial with me. She focuses on show choir. I focus on contemporary acapella. So happy to get you the repertoire or the resources. That's my job, and would love to hear from you if you're somebody who's interested in doing this style.
That's awesome, and hopefully we can use this vehicle to get some people in touch with you. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, Rob, so much. I appreciated your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. I got a lot out of this, and when I say that at the end of almost every episode, it's always true. But this one's different because I learned a lot of stuff that I genuinely did not know. I tend to gravitate around music that I feel expert in, and sometimes that causes our circles to stay too small. So this was a real stretch for me to kind of reach out and seek out some information about a type of music that I know nothing about. So I hope you felt some of that as well and got something out of it, and maybe are inspired to try a little bit of Rob's music or any of the other great practitioners of pop acapella that are out there in the choral scene. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, share, send it around your professional circles, leave a rating on podcast apps that you use. Of course, Facebook comments and anything that draws attention to the posts are always important as well as Instagram, Twitter. And then, of course, you can follow the Patreon, patreon.com/choralosophy for just $3 a month. We'll get you in over there. We're very close to 150 members. There's a growing community over there, and it's very, very helpful for people who join over at Patreon. And, of course, as always, use that Choralosophy checkout code whenever you check out at Sight Reading Factory, mymusicfolders.com, ryanmain.com, and graphitepublishing.com. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you next time.